Hello, my name is Shulamit, and I'm the creator of the MediSounds process. Every Sunday at noon, I host a Zoom meeting for us to explore wisdom teachings and experience the healing power of MediSounds. These meetings are made possible by generous donors. Please help this site thrive by liking and subscribing, and please join our newsletter at greatoctave.com to receive notices of our events. I wanted to talk to you today about trouble. Each of us, since we're all mature people on the call, each of us has gone through periods of pleasantness and a good life and things going smoothly. And then we've gone through periods of challenge and difficulty. Sometimes those difficulties come all at once. Nothing seems to go right, and we can't seem to find a way out. It's endless, it seems. And it depends on when it happens. It could be a suffering of the community, but if it's a suffering of an individual, it might occur when everybody else seems to be just fine, all progressing with their studies or their career or their retirement or whatever. And we seem to be the one who just has one challenge after another. And there's a lot of ways to take this. I think, of course, there's sadness, there's confusion, there's trying to adapt to a new reality in which, well, everything has changed. For example, in the case of illness, where you can't be part of activities and conversations maybe in the way that you had done. Friendships might fall away, but then new friendships might come into being also. Often people feel victimized and can't understand why it's happening to them. They might perceive themselves as being good people, and therefore what's happening can be perceived as a punishment, but they, of course, didn't do anything from their standpoint. Of course, you can say, okay, it's karma, it's something from another life, if you believe in that. You could say, okay, maybe this is something that's meant to strengthen me, to teach me about life, to teach me about myself. I mean, there are many possible explanations. And of course, you have inputs from others, from doctors, from family, from friends, some of whom might blame you, rightly or wrongly, for what's happening to you because of a lifestyle that you had. And people have advice. Some of it's worthwhile, a lot of it isn't. And even if it is worthwhile, it may be a question of timing. They may have said it at the wrong time where you can't take advantage of it. So I think the first thing to always remember with yourself and with other people that you know who are going through a hard time is to be very respectful of the process of grief, because not everybody goes through it at the same pace or reaches conclusions in the same way. And for some, it's like, why aren't you getting over this? Stop wallowing, for example, in the death of a loved one. Get out there, meet new people, live. Well, sometimes that's helpful. Sometimes friends or relatives prodding us to move forward despite our difficulties can be helpful. But you also have to respect that everybody's going through things at their own pace and with their own perspectives, and yours might not be the correct one. So try to be gentle. That's very important, to be kind and to be gentle. And to be also kind to yourself if you're the one who's suffering. Who knows why these things happen? I mean, I can give many explanations, but could I settle on one, to say this is the way it is? I mean, I got very sick in my 20s. We had a death in the family that was very hard to deal with. Um, my work was not satisfying. I lost somebody I loved. I mean, it was all in a period of a few years. I seem to remember a period of 7 years, but it might have been a bit shorter. If you count coming into the difficulties and coming out of the difficulties. But there's another way, when you look at nature, I know we think ourselves so far above nature. We're so clever. We can fix anything, right? We can we can take our fossil fuels and warm the planet to the point where it's a threat to us, but then we got some other scientists coming in and saying they can fix it because they're so clever and they're going to put shields to block the sun from coming to the earth. I mean, each solution, and I put that in quotes, each solution brings its own problems. And we don't solve anything. People used to die of bacterial and viral illnesses much more frequently. They didn't survive childhood, or if they got older, they were taken away by things like pneumonia, etc. That doesn't happen so much anymore, but we have chronic illness now, so you can't escape it. Now we have cancer, we have dementia, we have a lot of other things that challenge us. So I think it's important to remember that we are part of nature. In other words, we're an organic being that is composed, and eventually we decompose. And if you look at nature, there are periods of abundance and there are periods of scarcity. There's periods of droughts and there's period of abundant rain. There's periods of failed crops and then there's times of great bounty. We're not so separate from those rules, if you want to call them rules, or the way things happen. I don't think nature is that concerned with us. You know, it's a force and it impacts us, although we tend to ignore it and pretend that it's not true. But we're part of it. And if you can begin to accept that, if you can begin to accept that sometimes in life bad things happen and we have to acclimate ourselves to it somehow, ideally to come to some kind of peace. I don't like the word closure because I don't think there is such a thing as closure. If someone dear to you dies, how do you ever close up that book? I mean, I don't, in my experience, it doesn't happen. But you can come to peace about it. You can come to a degree of acceptance. You can feel love. The one thing that we have in our power is to generate love to ourselves and to the people around us and to the environment that we find ourselves in. You can also say, after the initial shock wears off, because that might take some time, that you're going to not be victimized by it, but that you are going to see if there's anything that you can learn from it or benefit from. So in the case, let's say, of impoverishment or a loss of income, once you get your act together, which could take a while, you might spend your time developing a plan and a knowledge base to help you when this period comes to an end. It doesn't provide immediate satisfaction, but number one, it keeps you busy and keeps you productive and keeps you focused on developing in the present moment something that could be valuable in the future. If it's an emotional thing, you can look at the emotions that have been generated by the particular event. For example, the loss of a loved one. This idea that we can hold on to things, that's in our control to hold on to things, that we have to keep the people or very, very close because that's the only way we can control what happens. This doesn't work. This doesn't work. You can't really prevent people from changing, from children growing up, from children growing up and deciding that they don't like your way of life, or they find you objectionable or worthy of deep criticism. You can't help people changing toward you, even people that you've been lovers or husbands or wives or whatever, or partners. You can't prevent that. Obviously, you can pay attention so that it's less likely to happen, but you can't prevent it. People grow at their own pace. Things happen to them that you're not familiar with. You don't own anybody. And we really know very little about other people. We know very little about ourselves. So it's a question of how you hold on to something. It has to be held gently, not too tightly. The metaphor that's used is if you hold a bird in your hand too tightly, you crush it, and if it's too open, the bird will fly away. So there is a balance to how we hold things, but the main idea is that you don't own anything. You cannot guarantee anything of substance. And you can work for that. You can work for solidity. You can work to build a house and a income and a retirement fund and all that stuff. You can become comfortable in the physical world, but you can't prevent change. So you can learn from these reverses, if you decide to, about what it means to be human and how much we control. Because you don't control very much, not very much of value anyway. Everything changes, everything ends, just like in nature. There's a constant shift in the weather, and there are forces that we don't even consider in our lives that have a big impact on us. Just witness what's going on in the world, politics, geopolitics, and in this country. You may not be involved in that, and yet it's going to impact you and me, of course. It's going to impact all of us. So you learn to hold life a little more gently. So that's another opportunity. So you're not a victim, you prepare for the future. You prepare for the future if it's a reverse of fortune in terms of money. You prepare for the future if it's a reverse of fortune with your relationships by learning from your experience, from taking the event and moving from victimhood and saying, what can I learn from this? I'm not saying that you should seek out hardship because it, why? And anyway, it comes when it comes, you know. But when it comes, you do have the option of saying, okay, look at how I'm reacting. Do I have to react this way? Because a clear mind is going to get you further than anxiety and worry and repeating the same story over and over again, like, how did this happen to me? Why is God picking on me? Why have my friends abandoned me? Blah, 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 blah. I mean, all those things are real in the sense of your emotional life, and they all have an impact, and I'm not deriding them, but I'm saying what is really useful. So if you are wanting to increase your consciousness, if you really want to wake up, there's a tremendous amount of, I don't even know how to describe it. There's a huge difference between ordinary consciousness and awakened consciousness. And in awakened consciousness, you can take difficulties with more ease, where they take less out of you. You still could suffer. I'm not saying it destroys suffering. It doesn't. But it's a different level. So you're not really picking on yourself for things that you really don't serve you at all. And that takes practice. Now, you don't remember particularly, or at least speaking for myself, I don't remember what it was like to be a teenager. I don't remember what it was like to be a little girl, and I don't remember what it was like to be a toddler, and certainly not what it was like to be an infant. But it was a completely different consciousness, a completely different awareness in each of those levels of consciousness evolution, if you will. I can remember some highlights from my teenage years, but I don't inhabit that point of view anymore. And I think that's true of everyone. You grow out of it. And when you grow out of it, you come into a larger expanse than what you were in before. But when you get older, people don't give you credit for that kind of thing anymore. They assume that once you're like on your way, you become an adult, you go to work. Once that happens, that's it. It's over. But it's not over. Its consciousness is constantly developing. And if you get stuck in the development of consciousness, you will start to freeze up. And we've all met people like that who talk about how wonderful everything was when they were a kid and how terrible everything is now. And they become rigid, which is aging. A baby is resilient, it's flexible. An old person's body and even their minds can become rigid and inflexible. And that's death, stiffness. It's death in life, but it's also, that's the way death is also when it occurs. But to keep your spirit young, you have resilience that keeps you young, and it keeps you young even though you're old. Your body could be 100, but your spirit could be 12 or 10 or 8, You don't, just because you look a certain way doesn't mean that's what's going on inside. But anyway, the point I want to make is you have to cultivate it. It's going to happen anyway. This growth happens anyway, but there's a huge fight on the part of the ego to keep everything in place. So it's a bit of a battle. And it's really helpful to get clear through meditation. And as you know, the sound meditation is very effective because, well, first of all, it's very accessible. And you don't have to, have the quality of being able to sit for a long time to access these levels of consciousness. And of course, it educates your organs. The vibrations actually do something to you internally, which they're not intellectual. And yet you begin to change. You begin to change. And you begin to relax. And you begin to take things more in your stride. And you begin to see yourself as part of something greater than just your little story, your little personal story. That you're part of an organic whole. And that changes everything. It changes your point of view about how you handle things in your environment. I mean, in terms of environmental issues, how you relate to other people, how you relate to yourself, because I think we all know that we can be very, very harsh on ourselves, and that doesn't advance anything. So I remind you that if you undertake a disciplined practice, you will see benefits. You will see benefits in the moment. While you're doing it, you'll see short-term benefits, a slight difference maybe in how you move around the world. And then if you do it long enough, it begins to be a habit and you change your point of view. And in the case of, for example, cultivating compassion, if you start working on that, it actually makes your days, experientially, it makes your days much, much better. You just have a better time. You're much happier. You don't get entangled in everybody's stuff. And there's certainly a lot of stuff, even if you're not meeting people. It's all on the news and television and whatever. It's very easy to feed into fear or anxiety about what's happening. So it's like everything in life, discipline over time. You want to play the piano, you don't just sit down, play a scale and go away. You have to keep at it every day, practice, practice, practice. And even the greats, Yehuda Menuhin or Yo-Yo Ma, even the greats, they practice a lot until the sounds and the practice itself begins to infuse your entire body. You don't have to tell your fingers to do something on the violin or on the cello or on the piano because your fingers are already educated. So our bodies have a great deal of knowledge. We might think it's all coming from our head, but we begin to collect this knowledge inside our bodies. We have memories in our bodies. So these sounds work at the level of the body and at the level of the vibration that we're connected to the greater reality. If you decide to combine that with a self-observation practice in which you just notice without judgment certain behavior patterns or thought patterns, you'll begin to see a change in the way you live, and it won't be such a mystery anymore. What's that title of that book? Maybe it was the 70s or the 80s, when bad things happen to good people. I don't even know what that means. What's a good person? We try to be decent, but we have aspects of our nature which aren't so decent, if we're honest. So instead of trying to label yourself good or bad, just try to behave properly. And when bad times come your way, keep a clear head, be compassionate to yourself and to the people around you, and prepare as best you can by educating your emotions, by cleaning up your relationships, by building a future in terms of, money or a career. And then you wait, because everything changes. And things that were bad sometimes just fade away. They fade away and good times come. So I will make sounds now. Let me just get some water. Your job is to be comfortable. Mm. Feet on the ground, straight back. Thank you for joining me today and being part of our community. I invite you to join us every Sunday at noon Eastern Time for the full live experience. Wishing you a wonderful week, and I look forward to connecting with you soon. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Visit greatoctave.com for more details about these webcasts, our newsletter, donations, and more.